25, breaks a couple of tackles, and look at him go! He could go all the way! Touchdown!
Winning is not a sometimes. It's an always. Winning is a habit.
What's up, sports fans? Welcome back to another episode of Gut Check Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Williams. With me, as always, good friend and co-host, back in his gross 49ers cave, Seth Floyd Hansen. How you doing today, man?
I'm good because we're doing the best episode that we're gonna do in these next few ones. So we get to talk about my Niners. We probably shouldn't even talk about anybody else, right? Like we could just talk about them the whole time for an hour if you want.
I kind of wanted to talk a lot about the Cardinals. So
yeah, I actually got a lot to say about them too. No, man, I'm good. Just, living the quarantine life, kind of getting through. We're almost done with our school stuff. Big shout out. Like I've had a lot of people reach out to me on Facebook, which is awesome. We really appreciate it. It's good to hear some of the positive feedback that we've gotten. A couple of my boys. First, Jared Banks. What's up, Jay Banks? Miss you, buddy. Thank you for listening. Jared's a big football fan. He's a big Florida State guy. I think he's just a big NFL guy in general. He just loves the ball. Best dancer I've ever met in my life. Fun fact: no one dances better than Jared Banks. And then Jeff Ager. Jeff's been listening to the pod. Big supporter. Jeff's one of my best friends. So appreciate you, buddy. Thank you for tuning in. Share it with your friends. Ask us questions, you guys. Anybody out there listening? You can go to our Gut Check page if you want. You can message us directly if you're friends with us. Like, don't matter. Literally, if we get if you get any questions for us, like we'll read them on air. And even if it's not football related, like don't even care. You could be like, Seth, why are you so much better looking than Matt? Like I'll answer that question if you want me to. If that's your question, like we'll go there. So
I can't even fight that one. That's fair. That's fair. But that's because I have all the brains. So
it
balances out.
I won't argue with that. I won't even begin to argue with that. So yeah.
Yeah, man. But yeah, love the fans sticking with us through YouTube and through the podcast as we figure it out. So it's fun, man. We enjoy doing this, whether we have a lot of listeners or not. So I got a work call coming in, but I'm gonna ignore that because we have bigger things to do right now.
Is that the colonel? Is that the U.S. general, head of the military hitting you up?
Thankfully, I outrank this person calling me, so okay. I can ignore it. Otherwise, I would have stopped and picked up.
Nice.
But yeah, we're talking NFC West today. I think this is going to be one of the most exciting divisions in football, and we'll kind of get to that. Really starting with the team that has the lowest over/under. That's the Arizona Cardinals. At 7 is their over/under for 7 wins. And they finished at 7-9 last year with Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray in their first season together. So can they repeat that, or can they do better? What you got for them?
So I think you misspoke. I think the Cardinals finished 5-10-1 last year.
5-10-1.
You're right. Yeah. No, you're good. So I'll be honest. I have more to say about the Cardinals than anybody, and I think they're probably the most polarizing team in the NFC West right now. So I'll try not to talk too long. Like hopefully we'll bounce it back and forth. But my initial thought to have them at 7 is like a push. Like I think if I had to put money, like that's probably I think their ceiling is 8-8. And here's the deal: when I think of the 2020 Cardinals, I'm getting a lot of 2019 Cleveland Brown vibes. Like this is a team that people are like really jumping on, and for good reason. Like I get it. You have DeAndre Hopkins now. You landed Isaiah Simmons. The tackle fell to you in the 3rd round of the draft. Like you guys had a good draft. You traded for Kenyon Drake last year, who was really like solid and was like a perfect fit. Like resurrected his career for sure. But my thing is, I do not for any amount believe in Cliff Kingsbury. Like I just don't. And to me, with football, culture is more important than anything. Now, they're gonna win. Like I would imagine they'll win 7 games. And if they don't win 7 games, then people are going to start looking at Cliff. If he wins 6, like his job will be safe, but he'll be on the hot seat. If he doesn't win more than 5, like crazier things have happened because with all the talent you have on offense, it's you should produce. And Cliff produces pretty good offenses, but he's never produced a very rock solid good football team, depending on how you define rock solid. Before I go into the rest of my whole spiel that I have into this, I'm curious to know what you think of Cliff Kingsbury.
Well, I thought it was interesting that you brought up culture because I think that was one of the things that Arizona brought him on for. He's a young guy. He like knows how to connect with not only just these quarterbacks, like he had Baker Mayfield and Patrick Mahomes at one point and Kyler Murray. So he's working with all these guys. But, you know, when he came in, he allowed players to take breaks to like go check their phones and Snapchat and Twitter and all that, like during team meetings. So like, I think actually what he's doing, and it'll be a big test this next year, is I think he is doing some good things with the culture. Now, to your point, he didn't create a winning culture in Texas Tech, maybe. But I think just the overall atmosphere and being a player's coach, that term gets thrown around a lot. And I think that may translate a little bit more if he's kind of the young and like can connect with them. You know what I mean?
So I see what you're saying. You want to know who else implemented social media breaks from team meeting? His name is Jim Tom Sula for the 49ers. That was one of the big things. I just want to throw that out there.
Fair.
But here's the deal. Cliff Kingsbury at Texas Tech. So before Cliff got there, who was it? Do you remember who it was?
Was it Mike Leach?
It was Mike Leach.
Or was it, yeah.
Mike Leach, from last I checked, and if I'm wrong, someone call me out. Mike Leach did not have a losing season at Texas Tech. He didn't have one losing season.
Yeah.
Cliff had only 2 winning seasons at Tech, and one of those he went 8-4 the year he took over, when Mike Leach's kind of culture and everything he'd left behind was still there. He went a couple of years and then had his next winning season where he won 7 games. So he didn't blow it up. And the rest of the time was below 500. His overall stats, win-loss record as a head coach is under 500.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, he didn't ever like crap the bed. That's the edited version. He never produced like a 3-win team at Tech. So if you want to hang your hat on that, like, great. But he only had 2 winning seasons there, and one of them was right after Leach got there, or Leach left. So you're dealing with Leach's players, like a lot of his culture and the things he did, like, is going to stay. So look, I don't know. The Cardinals have a lot of talent on offense. On defense, they've got some nice pieces, but they've got Vance Joseph, who I don't believe in either. Like, I just don't. They were like 32nd or 31st overall in defense last year. Isaiah Simmons is not going to fix that in the first year. He might help, but he's not going to fix it in that first year this year. And Cliff Kingsbury's never given me any reason to think that he's going to be able to get it done. Now, if he does, then great, prove me wrong. But I'm not putting money on a guy who's never done it.
Yeah.
And going 7-6 in college, like, I don't know if that's considered getting it done. Like, you might, maybe, but his career record is under 500. Now, the Cardinals, for what you need to see from the Cardinals, if you're a Cardinals fan, you need to see them win 7 games this year. And then the next year is when you're going to see them pushing for 10 wins or more, when Isaiah Simmons has a year under his belt, Kyler Murray has another year with DeAndre Hopkins. Some of your draft picks are now going to be able to make more of an impact. I just don't see that in the first year, especially with how good the 49ers and the Seahawks are. Like, it's an uphill battle. The last thing I'm going to say is my boy, Max Elmer, who's the biggest Arizona sports fan I've ever known. I was texting him a couple nights ago about the Cardinals, and he's someone I respect his football knowledge a lot, and we've talked about him a lot because we play each other twice a year. And I was expecting like some of these homer picks, like 10-6 kind of deal. And what he said to me is, he said, I'm optimistic. If they win 7 or 8 games, I'll be happy. Yeah. And he's someone I trust. And like, so that just kind of validated a little bit. Like, I'm not just being a 49er homer hoping the Cardinals are bad. Like, I think I'm pretty accurate with how I feel about this. And he could prove me wrong. Cliff could prove me wrong. He's just never given me any reason to bet my money on him.
Yeah. No, I think all of that's fair. First of all, with my in-laws listening, they're huge Mike Leach fans because they're
I love
Washington
Mike
State
Leach.
fans,
Sure.
right? So you're not gonna have any arguments there about Mike Leach and how great he is. So yeah, I get all of that. I can get some reservation with Cliff Kingsbury, but I think he is trending in the right direction. So overall, I'm going to agree with you. I think 7 is the right number. I wouldn't bet anywhere on this because I think it is going to be a push. And then there's always that concern that a quarterback in that sophomore slump, so to speak, or maybe they just don't make the same improvements that everyone's hoping for. So yeah, I mean, it's not a 10-16 by any stretch of the imagination. It's not a playoff team either. They could maybe stay relevant for longer now that there's an extra playoff team.
Sure.
But I think they're always going to be on the outside looking in. And then the last thing to compare, if you look at that division alone, because you got to get through the division if you want to make the playoffs.
Sure.
You may have questions about the Rams, which we'll get to, but they have a better coach and they have a more established quarterback. Seahawks, coach and quarterback, way more established. 49ers, coach and quarterback, way more established. And I think like those two core pieces alone outweigh everything that Arizona already has. So you give sort of the immediate edge to those other 3 teams in the division. And if you may play some competitive games, split some games with them, but you're not just automatically ahead of them because of one 5-10 season.
Sure. Now, just to add to your point, with the shortened / non-existent off season too.
Yeah.
Like that's like Cowherd brought up a great point, and he said in a season like this with a shortened or non-existent off season, like generally it's the teams that were good last year that are going to be good again this year. The teams that didn't have a ton of roster turnover or coaching turnover, like that consistency alone is just gonna gel, make everything gel. The Cardinals people are so high on the Cardinals because of their talent that they've added. That's great, but it's going to take, like, you're not, for week one, you're not going to be lighting it up. I just don't, you need time football is about repetition and just familiarity. Wow. That was a horrible attempt. I'm never going to try and say that word again.
He's a public education teacher.
Yeah. I mean, 8th grade, middle school, don't get any better than this. So that's my thoughts. And I think like I legitimately like this conversation you and I are going to have this time next year. Like I fully imagine the Cardinals to be fighting for a wild card team, for a wild card spot. But if Cliff Kingsbury is still the coach, I just can't ever imagine them taking the league by storm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like how the Ravens did or how the Niners did this year. Like I just don't see them dominate. And I think Cliff could make a playoff spot, especially with that extra playoff spot. I don't think it'll be this year. And I don't think they're ever going to be like, oh, they're a contender. Like you have to look out one of the best 2 teams in the NFC. Like I just don't think that's going to be Cliff's mold. And I think if they're going to have a ton of talent, I just don't think Cliff is that guy. But he's could prove me wrong. Who knows?
Yeah. I'm going to say I think Cliff can pull it off. Not this year, maybe not next year, but I think he could be the guy that they want to go with, especially if they keep drafting pretty well. Because maybe he couldn't recruit at Texas Tech like some of those other guys, but he doesn't have to recruit now. He just needs to coach who he has, and so that may turn out.
Sure. He needs to replace Vance Joseph unless Vance Joseph completely changes it. What do you think, really quick, in 10 seconds? Yeah. I was thinking about this. What's harder to coach? I think we've talked about this before, but I don't remember what you told me.
Yeah.
What's harder to coach, college or NFL?
Gosh, I don't know. I guess I would say college because of the recruiting aspect.
You're
I think
at
that's
such a disadvantage. Yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of depends on where you are. If you're, Alabama, you're always getting the top guys. But even that can sway. We thought USC would always just get the top players, but
sure.
How do you know they're top players when they're like 16, 17 years old? So much can happen. So yeah, okay. I would say college.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you agree?
I think so. I mean, I think the game is more. I think obviously you're dealing with like that's the difference. Like when you bring in college kids, like they're adults, but they're not adults. They've never lived in the real world. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like you still have to be like their father and their mentor.
Yeah.
You have to be able to, but when we get to the NFL, like these are grown men, they're professionals.
Mhm.
They don't, most of them don't want a father figure. Most of them don't want to feel like they're being babysat. They want to be treated like a professional. And that to me is the biggest difference. The game is different, X's and O's wise. It can be depending on who you play and everything.
Sure.
But the bigger thing is how do you deal with these kids? And I don't know what Cliff Kingsbury's style would favor more, like, because I could make arguments for both NFL and college. I just think I think you're right. Like college is set up that the rich get richer.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it is, and the NFL is the opposite with the way the draft works and everything. So yeah, that's kind of. I guess I didn't really give an answer.
And the NFL does try to create parity. At least, if you're the worst team, you get the number 1 draft pick.
Exactly.
Easier schedule, etc. So they at least try to help you out with that. And then you can be 9-7 and make it to the playoffs and the AFC Championship. Like we saw last year. But if you're 7-5 in college, you're getting fired.
You're considered a failure. So, if you talk to me, I think close to failure. Yeah, you went 7-5 a couple of times. So, no, that's a good point. It's true.
So, all right. So the next team up, the Los Angeles Rams, we have them at over under 8.5 wins. So coming off a little bit of that Super Bowl hangover, depending on who you ask, obviously they weren't super competitive all the way through. They were 9-7, and everyone likes to point out they would have made the playoffs had this new rule been implemented. They would have been a 7th seed. So yeah, a little drop off with the McVay Goff sort of parade that was already happening, and then some interesting moves, most notably getting rid of Todd Gurley, who's now on the Falcons. So 8.5, where do you have them here?
Hard under, and I have the Rams finishing last in the division.
Wow.
I don't think they're not a 4-12 team because I respect McVay, but what Les Snead has done to that team was, I mean, I guess you can justify it a little bit because they were all in. They were just all in on 2018, and if they had won the Super Bowl, like I wouldn't even fault him that much. He just didn't do it in a sustaining way. But you don't have Todd Gurley. Eric Weddle retired. Clay Matthews is gone. But the biggest thing was in the draft, you didn't do anything to help that offensive line, which played better at the end of the year, but you didn't do anything to really help that offensive line. So unless McVay has something with Cam Akers, who they drafted, and can really get the run game going again, because that's the difference, right? Like, the later part of the 2018 season, like they just couldn't run the ball anymore. And people were blaming Todd Gurley, and sure, he's lost a step, but there's more to that. There's more, like Todd shouldn't have to take the fall for this whole thing. Because I think you're going to see a resurgence in Atlanta. They're going to give him the ball in Atlanta. They let Devontae Freeman go. So I think Todd's going to have a very solid year in Atlanta this year. McVay has to figure something out. And I'm wondering what you think about, do you think the league caught up to McVay a little bit? Or do you think it is a personnel thing along the line of scrimmage?
It's probably a combination. It is the easiest answer. But I would say I don't think it completely caught up to McVay. I think he can handle it. I think he might have been too worried about Gurley, his injuries and things like that, and then just couldn't connect with Gurley and didn't rely on him as much. And I do think the jury's a little out on Goff. He's if you don't want to talk about timing quarterback, I mean, Goff is that guy. So he was off a little bit and he didn't get in rhythm. Didn't have his safety net in Gurley a lot of the time. So I think that hurt him. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think this year would be the testament. Is McVay still one of the best coaches, or is he still a really good coach, or was he just, a flash in the pan?
Sure. Nah, and I really like McVay still, but I think what the Rams, you want to know what the theme or the total attitude of the Rams right now is. Any of you, I bet you can find it on YouTube, when the Rams, right after they'd made a pick or right before they made a pick in the draft, and the cam feed went to McVay's cam, and you see him on the phone and you see him going like this. You see him getting like verbally, like you can tell he's flustered. Nope, I'm just speculating, but my guess is one of the scouts or Les Snead was on the other line, and he's like, how come you have not drafted me an offensive lineman? Or how come you're just giving me more skill position guys like Cam Akers, who Cam Akers is going to be fine, but probably wasn't the most necessary pressing need at that time.
Yeah.
They're not going to be a dumpster fire because I think Goff is capable. Goff is very much like in the Jimmy Garoppolo mode. Like he's got to have the system rolling for him. He gets helped with play action, and I'm not trusting him to throw it 30 times a game where he's just having to read the field. But I think the Rams are 6-10, 7-9, and like the Cardinals and the Rams could finish this about the same. I would expect the Cardinals to take at least one from the Rams. The good chance they could take both, depending on just how the cards fall. But I just no great offensive line, and you're having a lot of roster turnover with this team, and roster turnover is tough. Like it's just not an easy thing because you got guys that have to learn a new system, learn a new culture, buy in, make friends. You have to come together as a team, and you just generally in history, teams that have a lot of roster turnover, they just don't perform as well, especially right away. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the other concern is they don't have Wade Phillips on the defensive side of the ball either. And he brought that veteran presence. He wasn't a stellar head coach necessarily, but he was a very good defensive coordinator.
Sure.
And balanced Sean McVay. I think that was a good pair. So now they have another young and up and coming coach on the defensive side of the ball. So I think that in term with turnover, we've already talked about it, the short off season. I think that's going to be tough for them. I think I'm with you. Yeah, they could flip with the Cardinals. I'll say officially, I think they go 8-8, and they do finish ahead of the Cardinals. But it wouldn't shock me if things go downhill, especially with the schedule right off the bat. Home to Dallas, at Philly, at Buffalo, and then home against the Giants. So I mean, you could see them going 1-3 in that first stretch right away.
Easily.
And the Giants may be getting better. Nothing's really a freebie anymore throughout this. But yeah, it's a tough first 3 games easily. So
they're on the road at Philly?
Yeah, back to back. So at Philly and at Buffalo in back to back weeks. So at least they'll stay over the East Coast, but that's tough.
Dang, that's brutal, especially with no off season. And I mean, and that first Cowboys game could go either way, but like I'm not betting against I'm not betting against the weapons the Cowboys have. That's just my initial thought. But
and then I just want to point out the one other little tough stretch. They go at Tampa Bay for a Monday night game and then home to the Niners on Sunday. So a short week traveling across the country. Tampa Bay, obviously no cakewalk anymore. Yeah. In San Francisco. So there's nothing easy on the Rams schedule. So if they start off slow, it could really just kind of tank from there, and that'd be tough.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be interesting to see how it all plays out.
So next team up, Seattle Seahawks, 9.5 is their over under, which some may say is pretty low. I mean, they were a wild card team, but if I'm not mistaken, they were 12-4 as a wild card team.
I think they were 11-5.
11-5.
11-5, yeah, 11-5.
Right. So either way, 11-5. So they'd have to, be 2 wins less to take the under. But what do you have them at?
Yeah, I would take the over. I think just like how talking about Cliff Kingsbury, he's never given me any reason to really buy in. The Pete Carroll with Russell Wilson has never given me anything but 10 wins or more. Yeah. I don't have they finished below 10 wins ever? Check that for me real quick. I think they finished 9-7 maybe one year, but they are just, if you have Russ and he's healthy and you have Pete Carroll, they're going to win 10 games. They just find a way to win. And you want to talk culture outside of Bill Belichick, who's the ultimate culture coach, right? He takes whoever, puts them into the culture, and it doesn't matter, they win. Pete Carroll is the next guy who's culture. He's the ultimate players coach. And the biggest characteristic of a Pete Carroll team, do you remember how many miracle wins the Seahawks have, like, since Pete Carroll's
Yeah.
been, like, you just watch and you're just like, dude, something's going to happen. That's not by accident. And that's not because Pete just has drafted these guys who, like, have it in them to never give up. Some of them might, but it's mostly because they come in and Pete gets them to compete, and he gets them to believe that no game is over until it's over. Yeah. And, like, that's just what it is. And that's a dangerous thing. That's like the literally the number one thing you can bring to the table if you're a head football coach, is you get guys to compete and believe that they can win any game, regardless of who you're playing and what your talent level is. Now, I think what you're going to see this coming season is a lot what you saw last year, because they didn't do much to address the offensive line. Mm-hmm. They let go a couple of offensive line starters recently, if I'm not mistaken. They signed a couple guys in free agency, but none of it was like proven guys.
Big
like
names.
They didn't trade for Trent Williams or something, you know. So I just expect more of the same from the Seahawks. They did have a lot of injuries. I mean, they signed Marshawn Lynch off the street last year, so you know they were playing pretty banged up at the end of the year. But I just think with the Cardinals getting better, I do think they're getting better. The Niners, like, obviously, I don't think they got any worse. And so it just, I feel like it's more of the same. I think it's a safer bet to say 10-6 than 11-5. But they're going to win at least 10 games. That would be my gut, because that's all we've ever gotten from them.
Yeah. No, and I mean, that's exactly right. So they had 1 year in 2017 where they were 9-7 with both Carroll and Wilson. Now Carroll, his first couple years in the league, they were lower. He had some, actually 7-9 is the worst Pete Carroll has ever done. And I think he won the division one of those years at 7-9.
And that was before Russ got there
Wilson,
too. Yeah, that was before Russ was there.
So with the two of them, it's only 9-7 is the worst. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. So they did get 4 guys who can get into the rotation at offensive line. So they got some pieces there. They picked up Greg Olsen, who's a little older right on the outside, but he was coming out of Carolina where there was a little dysfunction on that offense anyway. If he can stay healthy, that's big. But he rotates in with Luke Wilson, which will help. And they picked up some cornerbacks as well. Bruce Irvin came onto their team again as well, but he's, again, sort of the tail end of his career. A little bit of a head scratcher, I thought, with Jordan Brooks, the Texas Tech linebacker who they got in the first round. But he adds some speed to that defense. If anybody can turn him into something good, it would be the Seahawks, I would say. But yeah, I don't think their pieces that they added and the moves they made were anything stellar. So unfortunately, I just have to agree with you. There's not much to say. I think it's 10-6, right? Like, it just, we'll see what they can do. Nothing on paper really makes you believe that the Seahawks are necessarily this stellar team or this great team, other than knowing that Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson can make things happen. And that's kind of all it shows.
That Jordan Brooks pick was pretty wild, considering Patrick Queen was still on the board from LSU. Who most people had him and Kenneth Murray as like the top 2 guys, and a lot of people were surprised. Like, I don't know. And I mean, I think Schneider he's living off of his, what was it, the 2011 or 2012 draft a little bit. Yeah. Like, people think he's not the worst. Like, they keep going to the playoffs, but like he hasn't been great drafting players, not since that. And so, I mean, he's had a couple good ones here. Like DK Metcalf is good. Mm-hmm. I hate to admit it, because I was like anti DK Metcalf last year. And he's proven to be really good. Again, I mean, it helps when you play with Russ. But he's proven to be well. So him and Lockett is good. I mean, Greg Olsen brings some stability. I don't think he's going to take him to the next level. But if you have Chris Carson, if he can stay healthy, if you can get just a little better offensive line play from Seattle, and maybe Jordan Brooks is actually like a hidden gem, like that would all be great. But regardless of any of that, like, I just think Russ is going to give you 10 wins. Like, I just believe that. So
I'll give Schneider a little bit more credit than you are. First, one, because if you're listening, hit me up. I want to work for you. 2, we just talked about the Rams going all in for a Super Bowl, and then now we don't believe in their team like at all. So I think there's some credit for the Seahawks being able to maintain this level of success. We can give a lot of the credit to Carroll and Wilson, sure, but some of that credit needs to go to Schneider because he's not making these big blockbuster deals that's going to bankrupt a team to go all in. So I mean, he traded for Jadeveon Clowney, which was a steal, and then now he's not feeling pressured to re-sign him at an exorbitant amount. You know what I mean? So I think that's a lot of credit for the GM because he's thinking, hey, if I can just get us into the playoffs, anything can happen, and I'll make, one or two small little short-term moves to try to bump us up without locking us into these crazy deals that really tank the team. So I think that there's a level of intelligence there.
So for the record, I think Seattle needs to sign Jadeveon Clowney. I think that he was hit or miss last year. He didn't always show up, but he showed up in some of the bigger games. Like, you want to know, that Niners game on Monday night, like he had like 4 sacks that game and just constant pressure. So I think that would help them more than hurt them. But either way, that's how I feel about Seattle.
Yeah, he was asking for $20 million a year. I think he still is asking for 20. That's steep, especially when you already have Wilson on your payroll as the highest paid guy. So But other than that, I don't know who else they're paying. I guess they're paying Bobby Wagner, Russell Wilson. Like, that's it.
Just
so you would think there's got to be some money laying around.
Yeah, so. Agreed.
But all right, so we got them both about 10-6. We didn't say it officially, but that probably puts them in second place in the division. I know the over-under for the 49ers is 10.5. So are you taking the over on the Niners here?
Yeah, I'm taking the over, and I mean, they could lose 2 more games than they did last year and still cover on the over. So, and I think, like, if I had to predict and put money in on the table, like, I would say 12-4 for the Niners this year. But like they didn't. I'm just telling you right now, like, they did not get worse. They didn't get worse. You traded for Trent Williams, who he is an upgrade at 31 over Joe Staley, who was banged up in 36. Like, and both of them in their prime. Trent Williams is a significant, like, Joe Staley is like a B+ on his best year grade. Trent Williams is in an A range, at times an A+. Like, he's that good. The question is just if he's healthy, and you and I have talked, he's going to be fresh. He hasn't played football in a year. So if he can just not have any medical issues come up. So that's a big one. A lot of people want to point to the DeForest Buckner trade, and like, he is going to be gone, and that's going to, his leadership and his presence. Like, the biggest thing DeForest Buckner brought to the table was his durability. The dude was playing like 900 snaps a season. He just never missed time, and he was just an anchor. But he wasn't a game changer in the sense of like an Aaron Donald or some of the guys we've seen. Heck, like, I expected Buckner to blow it up this year with the addition of Bosa and D Ford, but it was Eric Armstead who ended up with 10 sacks. Like, Eric Armstead came to play. And so he wanted $20 million a year. That was Buckner's asking price. And they just were like, look, it's just not worth it. And especially if we can get a first-round draft pick for him. Yeah. So I don't think Kinlaw is going to step in and immediately be the guy Buckner was. But you have a couple other guys that are not being talked about. DJ Jones, if anybody out there, you want to treat yourself, go look at DJ Jones highlights last year before he got hurt, just manhandling people as the one technique. He's a guy who's going to play more because Buckner's gone. So anyway, like, the D-line, like, I'm not super worried about it. They might take a little bit of a dip, but I think that they're going to be okay. And then the Brandon Ayuk addition, like, he's going to be good in Shanahan's system. And ultimately, the reason I'm so optimistic is Shanahan. Like, Kyle Shanahan is just a wizard when he's calling plays. The way he devises game plans, his schemes, he's just a wizard, the way he sets it up. So between Shanahan and not a ton of roster turnover, like, I feel really confident. I just do. They might not be the number 1 seed again, but I think they'll win the division. Like, I'm not I'm pretty confident they'll win the division. If they don't, they'll lose it to Seattle, but they'll still be in the playoffs. So that's kind of where I have them at.
Yeah, so on paper, right, I think they're still the best team in the division, so I would agree with you, and I would pick them to win the division. Probably 12-4, I think, is their ceiling, and then probably 10-6 is their floor if I had to put a little range in there. Just because like 13-3, 14-2 and above, like that's just so tough. And I think the NFC as a whole got better. Obviously, with everything Tampa Bay's doing, I think they're better. I think their division got a little better with Arizona improving, right? And then, we could talk about other teams. You're the expert between the two of us on the 49ers. So, I agree with what you say. There's some concern, obviously, about that Super Bowl hangover, that Super Bowl curse or whatever. And that could be part of it. Maybe some people figure out what Jimmy G and Shanahan can do. You also wonder, can these sort of makeshift running backs that they put out there, can they recreate that spark? There's just so much magic and so much, I guess, luck, good fortune that goes into a great season, especially a Super Bowl run. That's hard to recreate. So it's hard to just put a bunch of money on 13-3, number one again. But what we can say is, they didn't get worse. I love the Trent Williams pick. I think Brandon Ayuk, maybe he wasn't the best receiver left on the board per some, but he does fit in that system because I think Deebo Samuel can be your number one. And, you still have George Kittle and all that. So can the D-line and that defense recreate their magic as well? I mean, we've seen it with some of these pass rushers. Nick Bosa had a great year, and then is he going to drop off like DeMarcus Lawrence did? Even like Joey Bosa slowed down a little bit himself. So there's some questions out there. Maybe a few concerns if you are a 49ers fan, but I think, it's the ball's in their court still. They're still the team to beat. They haven't done anything that would make you think otherwise. So I would put some money on 12-4.
Yeah, you said it with to win that many games, like there's a certain amount of luck, and the Niners won a lot of close games. And to be fair, like all the games they lost were literally at the last play of the game. When you look at the Ravens, the Seahawks, and then that Falcons game where Julio Jones caught a touchdown literally with 2 seconds left on the, so. I don't know, man. They didn't go. My biggest reason for optimism, and it goes back to Shanahan, but they didn't go 13-3 because Jimmy Garoppolo like threw 50 touchdowns and he played outside of his mind for a season, like how Andy Dalton did for the Bengals back in 2015 or whatever. Like they just ran the ball. They played solid defense. Like it's just like the system. It's just kind of the machine and how it runs under Shanahan. And so that's why I know what I'm expecting. The run game hit its stride in the playoffs. And so like if people aren't going to commit to stopping the run, it's going to be a long season for everybody besides the Niners, because Shanahan has shown, like, I have no problem just handing the ball off every single play. On 3rd and 8 in the NFC Championship game, I'll hand the ball off. I don't care. And so it's going to be fun to watch. Real optimistic. Like, how I feel. Like, I don't need to go into it anymore. I think they've got a good handle on the NFC West. I think the Seahawks could challenge, but the Seahawks are going to need 0 injuries, and I just think they're going to need the Niners, like someone on the offensive line or defensive line, to go down and kind of change the tides a little bit.
Yeah, what's going to be very interesting and important to watch, I think, for the Niners, just looking at their schedule right here, which I'm sure you know by heart by now. So starting October 25th at New England, then the next week they're at Seattle, cross country. But then that stretch is New England, Seattle, Green Bay, and New Orleans before facing off with the Rams in division. Anything can happen. But we may be down on the Patriots. I'm looking forward to talking about the AFC East, but they're still the Patriots, right? And Belichick is going to scheme up something. So the travel, that tough competition, you're going to find out really what the 49ers are made of right in the heart of November there.
Sure. And those are the two games that when I look at, like, I wouldn't say surprised, but if I had to give you like, hey, we're gonna lose these two, like the Seattle one after being in New England, and then the New Orleans game is just tough, man. Going to New Orleans is tough. Now, it helps that they get to play on a Thursday the week before. They play Green Bay at home on a Thursday.
It's 10 days.
So they'll get extra time. But it's New Orleans, and we'll talk about New Orleans, but they're obviously going to be a good team. And so those are the games I'd be most worried about. That Dallas game is not going to be an easy one, week 15. But if I'm being honest, those are the only two that I feel like maybe you shouldn't be favored in. All the other games I would feel like the Niners probably should be favored in. So
yeah, but the other hand of having a 10-day rest is you have 4 days between Seattle and Green Bay, which is just crazy there.
Sure.
So, leading into that 10-day. So
sure, but
you fly across the country. Yeah.
But look at the records of the road teams playing on a Thursday night. And that's not a short trip for Green Bay. But you're right. That's a good point. It's a quick turnaround. And you know that first Seattle game is going to be an absolute slugfest. So you're going to have guys that are feeling it. So that stretch for sure is probably going to define the season to a degree, whether they're a top seed or whether they're a wild card team. Like, how do they handle that situation?
Yeah. So, man, always fun to talk schedules, see how this all plays out, when it plays out. If and when. So, yeah, man, this division, it's going to be fun.
It's fun. And I mean, I think you could possibly see 3 playoff teams. I wouldn't put money on it, but some people have talked about how if you're going to get 3, like you would have had 3 playoff teams from the Rams if the Rams had gotten in last year at that 7 seed. And just saying, like the Rams probably would have gone in and beat Green Bay as the 7 seed over the 2. Like I would have predicted that. Just because the Rams were playing hot last year. And so to give them credit, like maybe it carries into this season. I don't know. They just had a lot of roster turnover, it feels like. But they were playing really, really well at the end of the season last year. So,
yeah.
So
we'll see. Interesting to see with the new playoffs, what the season's going to look like just in general with all the craziness going on. But that's going to wrap up this episode for us. Guys, thanks for tuning in, listening, giving us the support. So, yeah, as Seth said at the beginning, send us your questions, comments, whatever. Hit us up wherever you can find us. We'll include it in the next episode.
Yeah, please do. Go Niners. NFC West is going to be fun to watch. So keep tuning in. Let us know what you think.
All right. Until next time, John Schneider, call me. All right. Out.